Today we're going to be giving a deductive defense of the pro-life position. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Epitome, where we try to put Christ at the center of everything. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman, and today we're going to be discussing the sensitive topic of abortion. I have two main reasons for doing this. Number one, because as Christians, we should get into the fray and not stand on the sidelines when it comes to these difficult cultural topics. And number two, because I find that the pro-choice and the pro-life sides kind of talk past one another, and they don't keep the central issue in the center, which is this. Do preborn children have the right to life, and is an abortion morally equivalent to murder? What I'm going to be bringing to the table today is a deductive argument for the pro-life position, which means if all of my premises are true, and the conclusion follows from my premises, then the conclusion necessarily follows, and the pro-life position should be believed by all. For someone to reject this argument and remain pro-choice, they're going to have to say that one of my premises are false, or prove that the conclusion does not follow from the premises. Before we get into our pro-life defense for today, I did want to recommend one book to you. It is called What to Say When by Sean Carney and Steve Carlin. Really good read. If you are someone who's pro-life and you want to understand the arguments well, definitely this is the one that I would recommend. It kind of goes over everything. And then if you're on the pro-choice side, this would be a great book for you to understand the pro-life arguments and maybe contend with those at their best rather than, the straw mans that normally take place within the conversation. With that said, back into the video. Premise 1. Human life begins at the moment of conception. This is granted by all embryologists that at the moment of conception, a new embryo is formed and that embryo possesses the qualities of life. And so human life begins at the moment of conception. Premise 2. All innocent human life should be granted equal legal protection. And this is guaranteed in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So here in the United States, the 14th Amendment grants equal protection under the law. And so if you believe the 14th Amendment is a good amendment, you should also grant Premise 2. Premise 3 is just the definition of murder. Murder is defined as the intentional or deliberate ending of an innocent human life. So all you need to do is consult a dictionary for this premise, and there should be no problems here. Premise 4. Murder is immoral and should be illegal. I could see some relativists trying to reject this premise and saying that all truth is relative and that there's no such thing as objective truth, but both of those things are self-defeating. And so what we're going to have to say here is looking at all ethical systems, whether you're Kantian or utilitarian or you're a divine command theorist, all ethical systems hold that murder is immoral. And so if you hold to any ethical system at all, you should grant this premise as well. Premise 5. Abortion always ends in the intentional or deliberate killing of an innocent human life. So, an abortion intentionally ends the life of a human being, which we've already granted that all embryologists say that life begins at the moment of conception. An embryo possesses the qualities that we would say is alive, which sounds awfully similar to the definition of murder that we gave earlier. And according to the 14th Amendment, they should be granted equal legal protection. Therefore, abortion is morally equivalent to murder, should be illegal, and violates the preborn child's 14th Amendment right. I'm going to talk about some possible deflections now, and I want you to focus on one key thing. They don't get to the essence of our argument, which has to do with the baby and their right to live. They basically ignore this altogether and throw out empty slogans that have nothing to do with the key issue at hand. You just want to control women. A very quick answer to this is we don't actually care too much about what women do until they try to intentionally end the life of their preborn children. Why do you care what women do with their bodies? I care because I believe abortion is morally equivalent to murder, and I think that our society should outlaw things that are morally equivalent to murder. The doctor's office isn't big enough to fit the U.S. government inside of it. The U.S. government actually does and should have a say in abortions if they are morally equivalent to murder, as we keep going back to. My body, my choice. This slogan has always seemed particularly empty to me because obviously the baby has their own body as well. But besides that, it's also irrelevant because, again, we're trying to say that the preborn child has a right to life, and you do not have a choice to end someone else's life. That is not your position, especially your own child. What if someone wanted to use their body to choose to rob a bank? Should they be allowed to do that? I think when we bring up scenarios like this, we can see how ridiculous this response is on its face. If you don't have a uterus, you shouldn't have an opinion on this issue. First of all, since we live in a society, we should have a say in what our society's laws are. But second of all, my gender has nothing to do with whether or not preborn children have a right to life. And so this objection, just like the others, is irrelevant. Abortions are still going to happen anyways. They'll just be unsafe abortions. If abortion is morally equivalent to murder, which is what we're contending here, then we should not be providing safe doctors' offices for people to commit these actions within. I've noticed that the main objections to the pro-life position fall within three major categories. And the first one I'm going to have to use a euphemism for because I don't believe YouTube allows this word onto their platform. And so I'm going to say unconsensual intercourse. But you know what I'm talking about if you can read. Okay, so let's talk about unconsensual intercourse, shall we? I do want to say up front, it's very important for us pro-life advocates to be sensitive to this issue because it is a big deal. And for people who have gone through this, it's very traumatic. I pray that you find healing in your heart and that if you need counseling to get over this traumatic experience, that you'll get that done. However, we are going to have to focus on our argument and whether or not this objection answers it, and so that's where we're going to be going moving forward. What if we are dealing with a woman who is the victim of unconsensual intercourse? Should she be able to get an abortion then? The first thing we can say to that is that two wrongs don't make a right. If abortion is morally equivalent to murder, then we should not be able to do something wrong to someone else just because we ourselves have been wronged. Secondly, you shouldn't kill a child because of the sins of their father. This would just be a very problematic precedent to set as a society. If you could be put to death because of something your dad did or something someone else did, well, where does that end? It seems very arbitrary. And so we should not be able to end an unborn child or a preborn child's life because their father did something horrible. And finally, unconsensual intercourse victims make up less than 1% of abortion patients. The only reason I bring this up is because a lot of times people bring this edge case up as a reason to have a rule, and we should never allow the exception to make the rule. And so here's one thing, if you're pro-life, that you could ask someone who brings up this objection. Let's say, for the sake of argument, I say, okay, there's a woman, she's the victim of unconsensual intercourse. Let's say that I grant abortions in that case. Would you be okay with outlawing all other abortions? Most of the time, the pro-choice advocate is going to say no. And to that we respond, okay, well, this is clearly not why you're pro-choice. If you are pro-choice whether or not we have a victim of unconsensual intercourse, then we need to talk about that. Why are you actually pro-choice? The second broad category has to do with autonomy. They'll say the rights of the unborn baby don't exceed the rights of the mother. Is this true? The preborn child is a human life, and all human life is equally valuable, and all human life is guaranteed equal protection under the law by the 14th Amendment. There's no non-arbitrary reason to say that preborn children should not have this. Bottom line, murder is wrong, no matter the development, location, or utility of the person being killed. Our final broad category is going to deal with personhood, which this is where your more sophisticated pro-choice arguments are going to be. They're going to say, yeah, the preborn child is a human, but they're not a person. But what do we have to say to that? The first thing we can say is this is a distinction without a difference. A person's humanity or personhood isn't defined by their utility or ability. The reason they bring up this distinction is because the preborn child doesn't have memories or consciousness or anything like that. The problem with this objection, however, is if we extrapolate out these problems, they can be applied to people who are alive today. What about someone who has amnesia and lost their memory? Are they now able to be murdered? Or what about someone who has dementia and they are losing their memory? You see how we can apply these same standards to someone else who is already alive with us, and none of us would grant that it's okay to just murder them. And in the same way with the preborn child, this is not a good reason to end their life. The last thing we can say is this is discrimination based on level of development. Basically, what this type of argument is saying is they're less human because they're less developed. This is just discrimination. And again, if we extrapolate this out, we could say that my life is more valuable than a toddler, or my life is more valuable than someone who's in their teenage years, or someone who's older than me might be more valuable than I am. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's false. And so all of this seems arbitrary. The only objective place that we can say that we're all equal and we should all be treated equally is at the moment of conception through the moment we take our last breath. I would also like to point out again that the categories of unconsensual intercourse as well as autonomy, do not focus any premises within our argument. Only the personhood argument actually seeks to undermine one of the premises, which is the idea that all innocent human life should be protected under the law granted by the 14th Amendment. But as we've seen, the personhood objection doesn't work. It's completely arbitrary. It can be abstracted out to where we could end people's lives that are here with us, and we would never grant if we're being serious about these objections. And so hopefully now we can see that this deductive pro-life defense stands firm and should be believed by all. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you're now pro-life. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want more content like this. This has been The Epitome. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman. We'll see you around.